There are several steps in setting up sales taxes in CenterPoint. The first step is to make a selection that will determine when your company considers sales taxes due. You have the option of having those sales taxes due posted to a sales taxes due account at the time that the invoice is created, or you can have it post to a sales tax due account at the time that the invoice is paid. Okay, so when the customer actually pays the invoice and you collect the money. So we need to set that preference as our first option. To go ahead and set that preference, we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Preferences. And there's a section in Preferences for Customer Invoices. And then I'm going to use this little down arrow here to scroll to the last option because it's the last option on the list. And it's a preference for sales tax. Okay, you would set this preference at the Database tab so that it would not change from user to user. So that you would definitely want to set that at the Database tab. If you leave the box unchecked, you are telling the system that you consider sales tax due at the time that the invoice is created. So you only need one sales tax liability account, and that is your sales tax due account. So everything would become due at the time that the invoice is created. If you put a check mark in the box, then when the invoice is created, it goes ahead and it posts the sales tax to an initial liability account. But then when the money is collected from the customer and the invoice is paid, that money is moved from the initial sales tax liability account to a sales tax due account. And that's the point when the sales tax becomes due. Okay, that does require you to have two liability accounts. You should have that initial sales tax liability account and then a sales tax due account. So once you've gone ahead and selected your preference, you're going to go ahead and click Save, and it's going to take us back to our main screen. The next step in the process is to create what we call sales tax categories. Sales tax categories provide a way to group various sales items for tax calculations. You determine if the sales tax category is taxable by selecting the sales tax jurisdictions that apply to it. If all of your items are taxed and calculated at the same rate for all jurisdictions, then only one sales tax category is needed. Okay. However, let's just take as an example for our company that we're working with. They actually sell food, groceries, and food, fuel, and general merchandise. Okay, they in their area where they're located, the state charges a sales tax on general merchandise, but not on the food. However, people who happen to be in their local Red Wing area are charged a sales tax on food. Okay. There is also for fuel a separate state sales tax that is a different rate than the general state sales tax. So fuel has its own state sales tax rate. So we need to set up 3 separate categories for our sales items of food, fuel, and general merchandise. To set up those sales tax categories, you would go to Setup and Sales tax categories. Okay, I've already got them created for food and for general merchandise. When you click New here, you're going to go ahead and set up another new one. I'm going to take these little check marks out of the box and on the bottom, and we're going to come back to those in a little bit. But as you see here, I'm going to actually click Cancel first. We've already set one up for food, one for general merchandise, and now I need one for fuel. So I'm going to click New, and we're going to give it the name Fuel. And then we're just going to uncheck these boxes at the bottom. We haven't talked about sales tax jurisdictions yet. So normally when you'd first come to this screen, there probably would not be any jurisdictions listed here yet. So I'm going to just remove those for right now, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the sales tax jurisdictions after we've created the jurisdictions. Right now, I am just defining the different sales tax categories that we have. Okay. Now, these sales tax categories will actually be assigned to your sales items as you create your different sales items. We'll see that in a little bit. I will show you where that gets assigned to the sales items. So I'm going to close out of there. And the next step is to go ahead and create sales tax jurisdictions. And those are set up underneath Setup and Sales and Sales Tax Jurisdictions. Okay, sales tax jurisdictions are used to track individual sales taxes. For example, you would create a sales tax jurisdiction for each state, each county, each city, and each local sales tax that is charged. Okay, sales tax jurisdictions are used to calculate different rates also for different types of products being sold. So for example, our general merchandise versus our fuel. They're both state sales taxes, but one is for most general merchandise and the other one is specific to fuel. So they do require two different jurisdictions because they're a different rate. Okay, you can see on the list here that we've already gone ahead and created our Red Wing local sales tax and our Minnesota state fuel tax. So we do need to create yet one for our state sales tax for general merchandise and for everything else, just our Minnesota state sales tax. So I'm going to click new here. We're going to call it Minnesota State. Okay, you do need to choose that initial liability that invoices are, when an invoice is created, that the sales tax is posted to. So I have got one called sales tax on unpaid invoices. You're going to choose the vendor from your list of vendors. And if you don't have them set up yet, you can click new to create them. But you're going to choose your vendor to which that sales tax is actually paid to. And then you're going to choose the liability account that it is moved to once that invoice is collected. Okay, so your sales tax due account. So this is my sales tax due on paid invoices. Okay, then down below, you're going to go ahead and put in your rate. So we're going to put in 6.685 here. And you're going to tell the system whether or not that is calculated on the selling price, the cost, markup, or whether it's based off of quantity. We're going to go into the fuel tax and see what we're talking about with quantity here in just a little bit. This one is calculated on the selling price. Then it's going to ask us if we also charge freight, do we calculate this sales tax on the freight? If you do, you're going to go ahead and check that box right there. And if you also calculate that sales tax on miscellaneous charges, you're going to go ahead and mark that right over here. And if you calculate the tax on tax, you're going to go ahead and select that. So we're going to go ahead and select those things that apply for our particular sales tax. Then in the bottom right-hand side here, we're going to choose which categories this sales tax applies to. So remember, we said this does not apply to food. This is not one that we charge for fuel. It has its own separate state sales tax. So it's mainly just for our general merchandise. So we go ahead and click Save there. And then it's going to ask us if we want to create a new sales tax for this sales tax jurisdiction. And I'm just going to say no. And we're going to create our own sales taxes manually rather than having the jurisdiction create the sales tax. Okay, so you can see here that I have a Minnesota state sales tax. I have a Red Wing local sales tax, and that's been applied to just food and general merchandise, but not to fuel. And it has a different rate. It has an additional rate there. And then we also have a Minnesota state fuel tax. And on that state fuel tax, we've said that it was based off of quantity. So we're going to record the number of gallons. And then this is the rate per gallon that it's going to be calculated on. And we're going to apply that to just the fuel sales tax category. Okay, so I'm going to click Save there, and I just want to show you that by marking the correct categories in here, if I go back into the category itself, so if I go back to Setup and Sales Tax categories, and if I go back into that one called Fuel that we created, it went ahead and it marked the right one down here. So it's really either place that you can mark that as to which sales tax jurisdictions that category apply to that category. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save on that, and we're going to go ahead and close out of here. Okay, and then I wanted to show you how you go ahead and assign a sales tax category to an item. Okay, so to go ahead and assign a sales tax category to an item, you would go ahead and create the item under Setup and Sales and Items here. And you just go ahead and click New, and let's just go ahead and say that we're creating a item for gas. So we'll go ahead and just say that it's gas here. And you'll determine whether it's an inventory item or just a non-tracked item in your system. You could assign a sales group to it, but then the next step is to assign a sales tax category. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the category of fuel. That means that only the jurisdictions that have been applied to fuel will apply to this item. So they will only be charged the jurisdictions that are part of that sales tax category. So not the Minnesota state sales tax on general merchandise and not the Red Wing local tax. They're only going to be charged the Minnesota state fuel tax. Okay, so you would complete setting up your sales items, but I wanted to show you that right there is where you go ahead and assign the sales tax category to an item. I'm going to click cancel on that and close out of the sales tax or the sales items there. And then we're going to finish this up by going ahead and creating our actual sales taxes, and then going ahead and assigning those to customers. So you might have a customer, like we have a customer here that is part of our company called Red Wing U-Haul. And Red Wing U-Haul buys several things from us. They buy food from us. They buy general merchandise. They buy gasoline. So we need to make sure that we create a sales tax that includes all of those pieces to it. So all of those different jurisdictions. So we're going to set up sales taxes that apply to our different customers. So we're going to go to Setup, and we're going to go to Sales, and we're going to go to Sales Taxes. And we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to set up a Red Wing sales tax for those customers who are based out of Red Wing, Minnesota. Okay, and for those customers, they may be charged any one of those sales tax jurisdictions, depending on what they're buying. Okay, that might be different than somebody who lives in a different part of Minnesota. So we might have just a Minnesota sales tax. Okay, and that's for those people that don't live in Red Wing and aren't charged that Red Wing local one, or are not necessarily live there, but aren't located in Red Wing and aren't charged the Red Wing local sales tax. So they may be only charged the state fuel and the state sales tax. So we're just going to move those jurisdictions in there. Okay, so you would need to create as many of the sales taxes as you needed to apply to all of your individual customers. Then when you're setting up a customer, so if I go to Setup and Customers, I'm going to just go in and edit my existing customer here, Red Wing U-Haul. You'll see here on the customer that there is a place to assign sales tax for them. So I'm going to go ahead and, since they're located in Red Wing, I'm going to go ahead and assign the Red Wing sales tax to them. Okay, however, this sales tax default is per location. So it is possible that a customer has more than one address, and if you've set up those addresses on the addresses tab here, so it's possible that this Red Wing address is assigned the Red Wing sales tax, but that this Randolph, Minnesota address is only assigned the Minnesota sales tax. Okay, so different addresses could also have different sales taxes. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and that is setting up sales taxes.